All right. 15, right? We got 15. Okay. All right. Daniel chapter 12 and in verse 2, there's two key things in that. Everlasting life and everlasting contentment. Has that already happened? Those that are already in the grave, have they already passed on to everlasting life? Have they already passed on to everlasting contentment? No, not at all. The text says many will come up. It doesn't say all of them, because some of us is going to be changed in the twinkling of an eye. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Now, you mentioned Matthew chapter 5 to make your point. Well, doesn't fulfilled mean fulfilled? If everything's fulfilled, then where does that leave the rest of us? There's nothing left to be fulfilled for you and I. Everything has already been. That's pretty simple stuff. We use this same argument with the Sabbatarians, with those who want to go back to the old law and want to hold on to the law. Well, has the law been fulfilled? Well, if it's been fulfilled, what do you keep following it for? And all these types of things. When you've got a mortgage and you fulfill that mortgage, do you keep on paying on it? No. Why? Because it's been fulfilled. Now, here's something interesting. Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 21, he said, world without end. I was looking at my Bible, that wasn't in there. New King James Version. I thought that was kind of funny. You use certain translations to fit what you want to say. I thought that was rather convenient. You talk about gifts. Well, the gifts ended when the perfect came. 1 Corinthians 13 and in verse 10. What was the perfect? The perfect law of liberty. When the gospel was fully given, the gifts ended. The Bible doesn't say anything about the gifts ending at the end of the world. The gifts ended when the perfect had come. When the gospel had been given. So when that had been done, there was no longer any need for the gifts. You mentioned the harvest in Matthew 13. I'm glad you went there. Let's go over there. Matthew chapter 13. And this goes back to what I was doing in the last segment. If this is true, this has got to be true. There's always a yin and a yang to things. There's always two sides of a coin. If something is true, by default, there's other things that have to be of necessity true. Look at Matthew chapter 13. Let's look at these things. And let's get another paper here. All right? Now, Matthew chapter 13, he gives two parables. Parable of the tares and parable of the dragnet. Let's notice this. In Matthew chapter 13 and in verse 36, we'll just look at the explanation of it. Okay? If all things have been fulfilled, okay? Now, this is where that takes us. Matthew 13, beginning in verse 36. Then Jesus sent the multitude away and went to the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, explain to us the parable of the tares of the field. He answered and said to them, he who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seeds are the son of the kingdom, but the tares are the sons of the wicked. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. I believe that age is the end of the world. We'll just use your stance on it. We'll just, for argument's sake, we'll just say that John's position is true. The end of the age, the end of Jerusalem, the end of an AD 70 in the Jewish. Let's just use that argument. We'll just run with that. Now, if that's true, there's some things in this text that have got to be of necessity true for you and I. Look at what it says. Verse 40. Therefore, or verse 39, the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Matthew 16, he's going to come with his angels, right? Okay. Now, look what he says. Therefore, that as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of this age. Now, if that has been fulfilled, if that has already taken place, the resurrection of the just and the unjust has already taken place, guess what? There are no more tares, and there are no more sons of the kingdom. You see that? Because the reapers, and there's not going to be any more reaping done. Because the reaping has already taken place. The harvest is past. There's nothing to be gathered yet. if John's position is true. If the resurrection of the just and the unjust is already took place in the generation of Jesus, there's no more reaping yet to come. There, you cannot be a son of the kingdom, nor can you be a tare. That's where that takes you. Verse 41, the Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all things that offend. Now watch this. If that's already taken place, guess what? You can't offend anymore. You see that? Well, look in your Bible, it's there. If the harvest is already passed, and the reaping has already taken place, and the end of the age was AD 70, and that's when the resurrection of the just and unjust took place, you and I can no longer today offend, nor can we be reaped, nor, look at here, can we practice lawlessness. Once the harvest, look, when the farmers go out and they get in their combines in the fall, and they go out there and they harvest that field, and they've got all the corn harvested, right? When everything is, all the harvest is done at the end of the season, can they go back out in January and start harvesting corn again? You know that just as well as I do. Why? Because the harvest is past. There's nothing left to harvest. That's where this takes us. If the resurrection of the just and unjust already taken place in the first century, in the generation of Jesus, then there is nothing left to harvest. Guess what? Where does that leave you and I? Leaves us out in the cold, doesn't it? Leaves us outside of Christ. What is that? And we cannot practice lawlessness, which goes back to 1 Corinthians 15. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. That's where that leaves us. Verse 42. And will cast them into the furnace of fire. Good. If the resurrection of the just and unjust has already taken place, that which means the reaping is done, the harvesting is done, guess what? There's no more casting into the fire. Who's willing to say that? Who's willing to say that nobody else alive in our generation will go to hell? There'll be no more casting into the fire, because the resurrection is the harvest and the reaping. And if that has already passed, you and I don't even have the possibility of going to hell. Goes back to 1 Corinthians 15. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. That's where this takes us. And we'll cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Don't worry about any wailing or gnashing. You don't have to worry about that, because all of this is already passed. 43, then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. That's a good word, Jesus said. You know what? We need to listen to what Jesus is telling us. Jesus is telling us there's a harvest coming. By John's proposition, now all this is attached to the resurrection of the unjust. John's saying there's not a harvest yet. The harvest is done past. I don't know about you, but I'm going to take Jesus' word for it. Jesus said there's a harvest to come. And since there is a harvest to come, I need to watch out what I practice. Because there is a harvest to come, I need to be concerned about the furnace of fire. And because there is a harvest to come, I need to be careful not to offend and practice lawlessness. That's where that rabbit runs, folks. There's another one here. You got about the dragnet as well. Look at verse 47. He says again, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that was cast into the sea and gathered some of every kind. Some of every kind of what? Some of every kind of person. Not some of every kind of Jew. There's not some of every kind of Hebrew. Some of every kind of person. You can read that and you can see that just as clear as I'm standing here, can't you? You can read that. You can understand that. There's going to drag that. He's going to gather some of every kind. 48. Which, when it was full, when what was full? The dragnet. What's the dragnet full of? People. Us. They drew to shore, and they sat down and gathered the good into vessels, but the bad, they threw the bad away. Now, according to the proposition, The resurrection of the just and unjust has already taken place. Again, you know what that means? Sorting day is past. There's nothing left to sort. So as a result, let us eat, drink, for tomorrow we die. If John's proposition is true, this is also true. You just can't get around that unless you just want to, you've already got a preconceived idea, notion, and you're just going to shove everything into every passage. Yeah, you can do that, but it don't make it right. If it's happened, the sorting day is past. You don't have to worry about being a good fish or a bad fish, because sorting day is already past. 5 minutes? Okay. Notice this. And you also don't have to worry about being a bad one. You see that in verse 48? They gathered the good and they threw the bad. If sorting day has already come, you and I don't have to worry about being a good fish, and we don't have to worry about being thrown away. It's either come or it ain't come. It's just that simple. This is a real complex. The truth is not complicated. This is pretty simple. And this is just right here in the text. Is sorting day come? If it has, then you don't have to worry about being a good one, or you don't have to worry about being a bad one. And notice this, verse 49. So it will be at the end of the age. We'll just use John's definition of this. If the age is AD 70, it just goes back to my point I just made. If the age is AD 70, if the age of the resurrection of the just and unjust is in AD 70 at the destruction of Jerusalem, then that means sorting day has already come. And that means reaping day has already come. So you and I, let's just go ahead and live hog wild, eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow we die. There's no consequences. You can't be sorted and unsorted and be sorted again at the same time. You're either sorted or you're not. And if that sorting day has already come, well, let's just do what we want to. So it will be, 49, so it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come forth, separate the wicked from among the just, and cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Well, if sorting day has come, just like with the parable of the tares, if reaping day has come and sorting day has come, well, we don't have to worry about being wicked, and we don't have to worry about being just, and we don't have to worry about the furnace of fire, and we don't have to worry about the wailing and the gnashing of teeth. And he says in verse 51, have you understood all these things? I don't need an interlinear to understand that, do it, John? That's pretty simple stuff. I can read that and I can understand, hey, there's a sorting day coming. And if that sorting day is coming, well, guess what? I'm just going to live it wild. And if reaping day has already come, well, I'm just going to do what I want to do, because I don't have to worry about being good or bad. I don't have to worry about the fire. I don't have to worry about wailing and gnashing of teeth. See, if that's true, if John's proposition is true, this is true by default. You don't get to cut and paste things. You don't get to come to a preconceived conclusion and absolutely ignore everything else. Everything has a consequence. Everything has something attached to it. If that's true, this is true. What I'm presenting to you in this segment and also in the other segment. Unless we've got eyes that cannot see and ears that cannot hear. Lest we should have understanding and be healed. That's where we're going to be at. What have I got left? About a minute and a half. I want to notice a couple other things here real quick too while I got time. Now, Matthew chapter 25. These things are true also. Matthew chapter 25. If these things, if John's application of the resurrection of just and unjust, and things he's trying to piece together, Matthew 24 and so on, then guess what? And I've listened to your things on Facebook, Matthew 25 just keeps on going in it. So if that's true, we've got the parable of the 10 virgins here. And remember those 5 wise and those 5 foolish? Remember those? What happened to them 5 foolish ones? They were standing outside knocking on the door, wasn't they? Why? Because they missed it when he came. So if Jesus came and the resurrection of the just and unjust took place in AD 70, you know where that leaves you and I by default? Leaves us on the outside of the door knocking. I want in. I missed it. And that's where I'm at. I can't get in. I'm knocking on the door. He says, depart from me, I don't know who you are. That's about that. Right on the money right there. Thanks.